We'll be covering 3 of the big changes. There's many changes that are happening, and this presentation could be the 1,000 changes that happened in 2022 in digital marketing. But broad scope, we've gone to look at 3 big changes that are happening, and that we need to get our head around. And as I said before, sometimes as marketers, we can stick our head in the sand a bit and say, oh, this change is happening, but I don't need to get my head around it just yet. And unfortunately, with these changes, some of them we are going to be forced to have to get our head around them, especially if you want to be effective in the digital space. Unfortunately, a lot of digital advertising platforms have worked out the way to make half of our job roles just keeping up to date with the changes and getting our heads around the technology and the platforms and things like that. So there's a lot to get our heads around, and I'm hoping that this will make it simple for you. This will be more of a technical discussion, so I welcome questions. I want to speak to your level where you are at. Because I understand that at the end of the day, a lot of you are, the stopping point of where this has to be implemented. You don't have someone that you can just outsource it to, or, flick it off to the IT department. Typically, school marketers have to implement the technical side of their roles as well. And as I said, we have put a link in the chat if you need to book a call with one of our team to implement something for you if you'd like. And so we'll be covering today the 3 big changes and how these changes will impact you, and then also what you need to know what you need to implement for these changes. Okay, so the first big change that everyone is talking about is the new iOS 14 update, which happened last year, so it's not that new, but also the broader move to a cookie-less future. And so what the iOS 14 update is Apple made by default with the iOS 14 update, they made it a default option to opt out of tracking using cookies. And so what this meant is that anyone who updates, if they're not aware of the settings, that automatically they'll be opted out of audiences and cookies. And what that means is that you can no longer track information or gather information from them when they visit your website. You can't gather anything about their age or their gender. You cannot track any conversions from them using the cookie. And it makes our job as digital marketers very difficult. But this currently affects Apple devices. So around 14%, if you look at Australian traffic in general, about 14% of the web traffic is from iOS devices. And so this means that we have less accurate data. And these changes, a lot of people say, well, why worry about 14% of your traffic? Because this indicates a broader move to people wanting to protect their privacy. And digital marketers, a lot of the training that we go through is now talking about how to prepare for a cookie-less future. And many people may think, oh, there's nothing we can do about this. There is actually, Facebook and Google are, trillion-dollar industries. They're not going to just sit back and not do something about it. So there's a lot of measures that you can take to make your advertising effective, and we'll go through what you can do there. So broadly, what this means is that you'll get less accurate conversion measurement. And so you'll have less numbers reported. The conversion tracking is less accurate. You'll have missing data from your optimization. So if you have a Facebook ad and you are trying to optimize for conversions, which is what we should all be doing if we want to spend our Facebook advertising money well, then that means that optimization is 14% less optimized. There's less data feeding the optimization process. And there is lost ability to do retargeting, which is one of the biggest impacts we feel as school marketers, because we rely so much on engaging with people on the journey of where they're at. There's also delayed data for up to 3 days. So all the Apple data is now delayed for at least 3 days, which has an impact if you have a daily advertising spend on, Google ads or Facebook ads, and you're optimizing on a daily basis, you have a higher spend on those days, it just means that the optimization is delayed by 3 days. And so the adjustments are going to be a little bit delayed as well. And then you can also no longer receive a demographic breakdown of ads data. This was very important back when I used to do e-com advertising. That data was very important to understand the audience and which demographics are responding to your different campaigns, your different personas in different ways. And so you'd look at the age breakdown and the male-female ratio and things like that. For schools advertising, it's not as dramatic. We pretty much understand our audiences and it's pretty much set. But you can no longer get demographic breakdowns of how many males and females are responding to your ad sets. Does that make sense to everyone? Has anyone felt the impact of these changes in the ads recently? You can just type in the chat. Okay, I'm going to carry on if no one has any comments there. So fortunately, there's a lot we can do for counteracting this. And the moves have been pretty fast moving and effective. So the first thing that we need to do, especially when we're talking about, I'm going to cover Facebook ads for now, but just so that you understand across the board, there are implementations that you can do to counteract that. So the first thing we need to do, if you have a Facebook page and a Facebook ad account, you need to set up the Facebook Conversions API. And what the Conversions API is it's a more in line with the privacy settings. It's a new way of tracking ads. So the conversion API enables you to track conversions on the server side rather than through what we call cookies. So when you go through the setup, you'll have to install software onto your website and onto your server. And so there is a little bit of technical setup involved in doing it, but it means that all of your conversions will no longer be relying on the cookie code to pull data through, but it'll be pulling it through on the server side of your website. The next thing that you need to do is to enable advanced matching on your Facebook account. So the advanced matching helps you to gather data from about your demographic, about your audience, like their demographics and their email, gender, where they live. And it uses all of that information across the web to then start at matching whether they were a conversion or not. And so it just gives the Facebook more creative license to use the data to tell whether they converted or not. And so when you tick the advanced matching is on, make sure that you also select all the other options on as well. The next thing we need to do is to set up aggregated event measurement. And so this is also more in line with consistent with consumers' decisions about how they want their data to be used. And it also it supports marketers in still running effective campaigns while honoring people's wish for privacy on Facebook. And so we are now going to be limited to 8 conversions. What we like to do is set up standard conversion events. We have 8, and then we classify all the different conversions into one of those 8 different categories. So you can have school tour bookings, event booking inquiry, telephone call click, those sorts of conversions, and then you can start categorizing them, all of your conversions, into one of those 8 categories. And we find that standardizing your conversion names is just going to help you across the board to have an effective and a streamlined system. So if you are running Facebook lead ads or link click ads, where you're not actually optimizing for conversion, you're just getting traffic to click the link, not based on any data. You don't need to worry about the setup. But what we're seeing is those types of ads are just becoming ineffective. I think it was at least 2 years ago, the last time we set up a link click campaign, because you may get lots of clicks, but it's not optimized for the action that you want to take. It's very important that as you go through your website that you have all the events, the conversions that you want people to take set up. So whenever someone books a school tour, request that the confirmation goes through to a landing page and that you have the conversion kind of school tour set up. And that way, when you do advertising on Facebook and Google Ads, that way it can actually optimize for the people that take that action. And it's dramatically decreases the cost of conversion. So the next step, does anyone have any questions with that? And has anyone, there's been a lot of changes. So we wrote a very detailed guide for the team on how to do the setup. And as soon as we published that, they changed it all. But it looks like it's starting to stabilize, and Facebook and Google is starting to know what they're doing with this and what their systems are going to be. So has anyone had to implement any of these changes just yet? You can type in the chat. So if you want, I can send out the guide that I have for my team on setting this all up. It's more technical natured, but it is a step-by-step process, what we do when we're setting up a new ad account. Yeah, Nikita says a link click campaign is not as effective. The guide would be helpful. Yeah, I can send out the step-by-step guide. Yeah, so link click, honestly, Facebook just wants to make money from link click campaigns. If you are struggling to set this all up, because unfortunately Facebook doesn't have a big red flag to say it's not, well, it does have some warnings, but it's still going to serve your ad. And you may not be aware that it's, the conversion isn't tracking, the conversions aren't quite set up correctly. And so if you feel that your campaigns are suffering and you don't know why, you can do what is called a lead ad as an interim. They are optimized for the action of lead. It's just that you have to have a process very tightly connected with a lead ad where you follow them up immediately. You get them to double opt in, you confirm that they want to be opted into whatever they're booking for, and you have SMS and email supporting that system, because it's so easy to book in for a lead ad that sometimes the leads can be of a low quality if you don't do it correctly, and also manage your audience that you're targeting to. Okay. So that's that. I wish you all luck with that process of implementing this. It was something for our team to get our head around, and so it is quite extensive, but it has to be done. There's not going to be a day where we're going to go back to just how it was before. So the next change is very exciting, but also very daunting. And I think a lot of us have been putting our head in the sand about this one. It's the new Google Analytics 4. And this is going to become compulsory from July next year. And if you open up a new account, a new analytics account now, it's already default. You can't open up the previous version of an account. So GA4 is exactly the same move from preparing for a cookieless future. So it's more server-side tracking. There's a lot more involved in setting it up. It's now got a setup guide. Instead of just getting the code to install it on your website, there's a few page setup guide that you have to go through to make sure that you have it set up exactly how you want it set up for the data that you want. So it is very daunting to set up. This is the front dashboard is completely customizable, but once you get your head around it, you will start to realize the power in it. And I'll go through some of those changes right now for us. So the main changes are that there'll be a fully customizable dashboard that you can kind of display exactly what you want to have on your dashboard. Google Analytics used to have a feature called goals, where you could say, if people visit this thank you page, then they have booked a school tour, and you set that up as a goal, and you could get your reporting based on the goals and how many goals were achieved. And that was very easy to set up. It's now called conversions. It's a lot more complicated to set up, and there's URL paths and flow that you have to take into account when set up these conversions. But once it's set up, it's going to be accurate information. Google Analytics before I found was a little bit inaccurate with their. Nikita, the recording will be available to you. I'll send the recording to you after the session. Another change is that the bounce rate is now going to be called the engagement rate. So before on the Universal Analytics, the bounce rate was if someone visited the website and they did nothing, then they would be called a bounce, and that would go to your bounce rate. And typically we were seeing schools getting a bounce rate of anywhere between about 40% of their traffic. Now it's called an engagement rate. And it's actually, people have to be engaged to fall into this bucket. So they have to spend at least 10 seconds on your website, and they have to actually click or convert to one of your conversions, which is automatically set up through GA4. And there is another condition that they have to meet to even qualify as an engaged user on your website. So GA4 is very much based around user behavior and flow, and understanding how people are using your website, which is the exact kind of information that you need for search engine optimization these days, and understanding how people are using your content. I think the days where we had websites that just had reams and reams of information, and whether they used it or not, it didn't really affect us, is over. The expectation now is moving to, we have to have a website that users want to use, and the content has to be engageable, or it shouldn't be there. Otherwise, it's going to be hurting our SEO and our website performance. The big change for GA4 is that it's going to stop the reliance on cookies for tracking. Server-side tracking is also going to be available on GA4. Another great step for GA4 is that it's going to be using machine learning where there are data gaps. And so it's going to start automatically alerting you to significant trends on your data. So say, for example, and schools are going to see this during the school holidays, it'll be interesting to see how this pans out. But say, for example, you have about conversion rate on your tours page of 20%, 15 to 20% is what we would expect for a school. And then December holidays hit and it goes down to 2%. Then it was going to alert you to this fact and give you recommendations for your page, which I think is pretty cool. It's going to be a great feature to use. The insights and the dashboard and the way you navigate GA4 is very much based around being customer-centric or user-centric. So how people are using your content, their flow, do they return? Like they look at, it focuses on retention rates and returning visitors, what conversions they click through on, and yeah, their engagement, as I said. So it's very much customer-centric insights. And this is something that I struggled with in digital marketing from 10 years ago, really trying to get that customer-centric information of what is actually working to get these people, the individual data of people, what's working to get them across the line. And so Google Analytics is now no longer just interested in kind of broad demographic, big picture information, but it's more unique, looking at the individual user experience and mapping that data out for you. And as I said, goals in Universal Analytics are now called conversions in GA4, and there's quite a lot that needs to be done in terms of setup. I will say just a hint in the right direction of what you need to do to set this up. I would definitely install Google Tag Manager for both your Facebook and your Google tracking, because what we see when we do SEO optimization on our school websites is we see a lot of different installations of pixels and cookies and tracking and for all different websites, and that really does affect your site load speed. So what we recommend is you just install the Google Tag Manager on your website, And then from Google Tag Manager, you install the Facebook picture, the Google Ads tracking tag, and the Google Universal Analytics installation. You can go from there. It makes it a lot easier. So what I recommend you to do is to install the new GA4 onto your website and to run it parallel with your Universal Analytics for now, because it's going to be very hard to convert all your reporting overnight, but you don't want to have the lost data by just installing it later on. So install it as soon as you can, and then worry about the implications and what that means and playing around with the platform later on. And as I mentioned before, Google Tag Manager, use your Google Tag Manager, and then keep your current analytics running in parallel so you don't miss any insights. And you may know how to do something in your Universal Analytics that you still need to figure out in the GA4, but don't put off installing it any longer. Does anyone have any questions regarding GA4? And who has it installed on their website already? You can just type in the chat if you want to, if you have any questions, otherwise I'll move on. Not yet, Leah. Yeah, I know. And we were talking to a Facebook ads expert the other day, and he was like, oh, I can't even figure GA4 out. And now it's been announced that it's going to become compulsory. So we're all heading towards the end of the cliff. And some of us have realized it, and some of us not yet. So it should take, it will take a chunk if you're not a technical person. I would probably allocate around 30 minutes to an hour just to try to figure out installing it. And I recommend installing it by Google Tag Manager. And then there's an option to test it to make sure that you're actually getting data from it. And you can also log into your GA4 dashboard and look at the live data to make sure that you're starting to receive live visitor information. Right, there's one more change that I'd like to talk about, and that is the new .au domains. And so what has happened is that the Australian Domains Authority has released a new domain extension for the first time in a very long time. And so this is .au. Now, I understand that most of our schools are qld.edu.au or, the education extension. But what we're finding is that if you don't register or pre-register your .au domain, there is risk of a competitor or another business kind of registering your domain, and then you have to go into a battle to claim your domain name. So even if your website is .edu.au or qld.edu.au, I would go and recommend and try register the .com version of the .net, the .au version. So you can pre-register most domains. It's about $10 to register. And it means, like, for businesses like me, it just means a really a simpler domain name that's a little bit shorter, and it's a little bit nicer. So if you own the business name, or if you're the employee within the business, you get preference on the name. So there's a pre-registration that gives preference to the business owners now. After that, it'll go to the open market for anyone who wants to buy domains. And so it opened up from the 24th of March, and I recommend just going and double checking all your school domains, any kind of additional blogs or alumni websites or tour websites that you have, just double checking that you also have the .au registration for your domain. Great, and you can pre-book that with your domain provider, or you can just email your IT. IT should be able to do this one for you. Okay, so if anyone can just type in the chat after we've gone through all these big changes that is quite a significant workload to get our systems and structures right. What steps do you have to take to get your marketing systemized over the next 12 months? If you could just type that in the chat, that'd be great.